Most people have never heard of Ptahhotep, but over 4,000 years ago, long before the Bible was written or the Roman Empire existed, a man in ancient Egypt left behind a guide to surviving in a corrupt world. His message wasn't poetic or abstract. It was brutally practical, and what's strange is how relevant it still is today. Ptahhotep's advice feels like it was written for our time. He warned that the downfall of civilizations begins when people stop listening to wisdom and start listening to noise. Sound familiar? Just look at the way our world rewards loud voices over smart ones. On social media, in politics, in entertainment, those who talk the most, often with the least substance, get the most attention. Ptahhotep saw this pattern play out over and over in the ancient world. Arrogant leaders stopped taking advice. Fools gained influence simply by being loud. And empires that once seemed unstoppable collapsed under the weight of their own pride and ignorance. His most important idea is simple but powerful. A fool is known by his many words, and a wise man by his silence. This isn't about being quiet all the time. It's about knowing when to speak and why. Think of the last time you were in a pointless argument online, or watched someone dominate a conversation without saying anything meaningful. Ptahhotep would say that's a warning sign. Not just for that person, but for a society that listens to them. He believed that wisdom meant listening more than talking, speaking with purpose, and resisting the urge to argue with those who don't want to learn. And thousands of years later, the same principle applies. Whether you're in a workplace meeting, scrolling through social media, or trying to make a tough decision, choosing silence, observation, and thoughtful speech still sets you apart. Ptahhotep's ancient text isn't just a dusty relic. It's a blueprint for navigating a world where noise too often drowns out reason. The real question is, in a time when fools shout and wisdom whispers, are you listening? Ptahhotep's warning wasn't poetic. It was a survival rule. The fool is dangerous not because of what he does, but because of what he says. Thousands of years ago, this was already clear. In ancient courts, one careless sentence could destroy reputations or spark conflict. Today, the setting has changed, but the risk hasn't. Words spread faster than ever. Online, on TV, across every platform. And often, the people who speak the most are rewarded with the most attention, regardless of what they're actually saying. The danger isn't just that foolish voices exist, it's that they dominate. Algorithms boost outrage. News cycles reward drama. The loudest person in the room doesn't need to be right. They just need to be louder than everyone else. When truth becomes just another opinion, fools thrive. In Ptahhotep's time, the wise spoke with caution, because words had weight. Today, the opposite often feels true. Restraint is mistaken for weakness, and the loudest voice wins by default. That's how misinformation spreads, how confident ignorance replaces humble understanding. But silence isn't weakness. It's clarity. It's the discipline to observe first, think critically, and only speak when it matters. That's what separates the wise from the fool. And it's a skill we urgently need to reclaim. Think about your own life. That coworker who talks over everyone in meetings. The friend who argues just to win, not to understand. The online thread where nobody's really listening. These aren't just annoyances. They're symptoms of a deeper problem. A world that's forgotten the value of listening. Ptahhotep wasn't just warning about bad leadership or corrupt kings. He was pointing to a universal truth. If society stops rewarding wisdom, it will collapse under the noise. It happened then. It's happening now. The choice is simple. Talk for the sake of noise or speak with purpose. Listen not to reply, but to understand. Wisdom is not in having all the answers, it's in knowing which voices are worth hearing. Ptahhotep's clearest warning was also the most overlooked. Arrogance destroys more than enemies ever could. He saw it firsthand. Leaders who stopped listening, who surrounded themselves with flatterers who believed they were above failure. And every time the result was the same. Collapse. Not from external threats, but from within. Arrogance doesn't look like a villain in a movie. It looks like success that refuses to adapt. It's the CEO who ignores feedback because the profits are still high. It's the leader who thinks disagreement is disloyalty. It's the everyday person who shuts down a conversation by saying, "I already know that." In modern life, arrogance often hides behind performance. People assume if they're winning, they must be right. But Ptahhotep's point is sharper than ever. Arrogance is when you stop learning, because you think you've already won. And that's exactly when you start to lose. Most major failures, from business disasters to political collapses, didn't happen because of one big mistake. They happened because of repeated small refusals to listen, to adapt, or to admit wrong. Arrogance made course correction impossible. Arrogance isolates you. The more convinced you are that you don't need advice, the fewer people will offer it. Eventually, you're surrounded only by yes men, and by the time anyone tells you the truth, it's too late. Think of any downfall you've seen, on the news, at work, even in your personal life. At some point, there was a warning. Someone spoke up. Someone raised a concern. But the message didn't get through, because pride blocked the signal. That's why Ptahhotep didn't just warn rulers. He warned anyone who thought they were above counsel. Because the real test of strength isn't how much power you have. It's whether you still listen when you don't have to. Humility isn't weakness. It's insurance. It protects you from your blind spots, from overconfidence, from believing your current success guarantees future survival. The most stable people, the best leaders, the smartest thinkers, even the most grounded friends, aren't the ones who claim to know everything. They're the ones who stay curious, who ask, who challenge themselves. Ptahhotep saw it clearly thousands of years ago. You don't fall because you're weak. You fall because you stop learning. And arrogance is always the first sign that fall has begun. Ptahhotep warned, never argue with a fool. Not because the fool might win, but because you lose the moment you engage. At first glance, that sounds harsh. But look at today's world. Every comment section, every debate online, every social feed is full of people who don't want to learn. They just want to win. And the more you argue with them, the more oxygen you give to their nonsense. Fools argue to be seen, not to understand. They aren't looking for truth. They're looking for attention. And when you respond, you give it to them. The moment the wise man speaks in that arena, his voice doesn't rise above. It gets lost in the noise. Think about your own experience. How many times have you spent time explaining something to someone who had no interest in hearing it? Did the facts matter? Did logic make a difference? Probably not. And you didn't just waste time. You lost energy, credibility, and sometimes even your own clarity. That's the trap. Ptahhotep's advice wasn't just about saving face. It was about conserving your power. Not every fight is worth fighting. Some arguments aren't winnable because they're not based on logic or shared values. They're emotional landmines designed to pull you into chaos. Modern life is full of examples. The coworker who always stirs up conflict. The family member who turns every conversation into a fight. The stranger online who posts just to bait reactions. Engaging with them doesn't fix the problem. It feeds it. Your silence isn't surrender. It's strategy. Silence doesn't mean you agree. It means you value your time and clarity too much to waste them. It means you know the difference between speaking to inform and speaking into a void. That's not weakness. That's control. In a world that rewards provocation over wisdom, restraint becomes a kind of rebellion. Refusing to argue with fools protects your focus, your energy, and your influence. Because when you stay silent, the fool exposes himself. But when you respond, people stop noticing the difference. Not every battle elevates you. Some just drag you down. Ptahhotep said, "The more a fool talks, the more he reveals himself. A wise man speaks only when his words have weight." That advice feels even more urgent today. In a world where everyone has a platform, where speaking often is confused with speaking well, the ability to communicate with precision is becoming rare and powerful. In a noisy world, clarity is influence. We've all seen people talk for 10 minutes and say nothing. They fill space with words but leave no impact. It happens in meetings, in politics, in interviews, even in friendships. But think of the people who really make an impression. Often, they speak less, not more. They pause. They choose their words. And when they speak, people listen. The key isn't volume. It's value. Lincoln delivered one of the most powerful speeches in U.S. history, the Gettysburg Address, in under 300 words. He didn't ramble. He didn't raise his voice. He said exactly what needed to be said, and nothing more. Contrast that with today's communication culture. Politicians talk for hours without answering a question. Influencers churn out content daily, often repeating the same ideas. Most of it is forgotten by the next scroll. Why? Because words without substance don't stick. The more you speak without meaning, the less people take you seriously. Ptahhotep understood that discipline in speech signals discipline in thought. The person who speaks only when ready signals control, focus, and respect for the audience's attention. That kind of presence can't be faked. It has to be earned. Are your words moving things forward, or just filling space? Are you speaking to be understood, or just to be noticed? Are you adding value, or just adding volume? Silence, when used wisely, is not passive. It's active. It shows you're listening. It allows you to observe, reflect, and speak from a position of understanding rather than reaction. Credibility isn't built by speaking often. It's built by speaking well. If you want to stand out today, say less, but make it count. Speak like your words are expensive. Because in a world flooded with noise, it's the voice of quiet confidence that people remember. Ptahhotep warned that while structure is necessary, blind obedience is dangerous. He lived in a world where kings were worshipped like gods, yet he urged people to think before they follow. And that insight still matters, because the line between respect and submission is thinner than most people realize. Power doesn't always come with wisdom. Titles, status, and authority often get mistaken for intelligence or morality. But having a higher rank doesn't automatically mean someone's right. And following someone just because they're in charge is how bad decisions get normalized. You've probably seen it play out in real life. The boss who pushes a failing strategy and no one speaks up. The politician who demands loyalty over logic. The parent, teacher, or leader who insists, "Do it because I said so." That's not leadership. That's control. Ptahhotep didn't say reject all authority. He said question it. A wise person knows how to follow, but also when to challenge. There's a difference between working with structure and surrendering your judgment. One creates order. The other creates obedience without responsibility. Your responsibility doesn't end when you follow orders. If a decision leads to harm, "I was just doing what I was told," doesn't erase your role in it. History is full of tragedies caused by good people who stayed silent, who followed without thinking, who confused loyalty with surrender. Even today, this shows up in small, everyday ways. An employee stays quiet about unethical practices. A student lets misinformation spread because a teacher won't be challenged. A citizen trusts a headline without checking the source. Obedience without discernment is how mistakes become systems. Questioning authority doesn't make you disloyal. It makes you responsible. A wise person respects leadership, but doesn't worship it. They follow structure when it works, and challenge it when it fails. And when that balance is lost, when leaders expect silence and followers give it, we see the same outcome every time: collapse. Real respect includes the courage to speak up, to say this isn't right, to ask, why are we doing it this way? That's not rebellion. That's maturity, because power unchecked will always push further. And unless someone is willing to say, enough, it never stops on its own. Ptahhotep wrote his words over 4,000 years ago, before electricity, before democracy, before nearly everything we know today. And yet, his advice still applies. That alone should tell us something. Technology changes, but human nature doesn't. We still chase power. We still reward arrogance. We still argue with fools, speak without meaning, and follow without thinking. The core flaws Ptahhotep warned against didn't disappear. They just got louder, faster, and more widespread. But here's the part no one wants to admit. We're not short on wisdom. We're short on application. We already know the consequences of arrogance, of careless speech, of blind obedience. We've seen the patterns. We've studied the history. The issue isn't that no one told us. It's that we keep choosing to ignore it. And why? Because noise is easier than thought. Because attention feels better than discipline. Because it's harder to question your own habits than to follow the crowd. But Ptahhotep didn't write for crowds. He wrote for individuals, for people willing to think for themselves. Wisdom is personal. It's not something that happens at the top. It happens in moments, when you choose not to argue, when you stay humble after a win, when you question a decision that doesn't feel right. Empires fall, not because everyone failed, but because too many people stayed silent. Too many knew what was right but acted like they didn't. Wisdom only matters if it leads to action. So the question isn't whether Ptahhotep was right. The question is whether we're finally ready to listen. We live in a time where information is everywhere, but insight is rare. Where opinions are loud, but understanding is quiet. And where the ancient truths still hold the most power, if we have the courage to live by them. The world has always rewarded those who master human nature, not just observe it. And in the end, the people who listen, think, and speak with purpose will always have the real advantage. The blueprint was written thousands of years ago. It's not too late to follow it.